They say nothing good ever happens after 3 a.m. The streets are quiet, the world is asleep, and in the silence, shadows move differently. But sometimes, the real horror doesn't live in the streets, it waits where you feel safest. In your bedroom. Beneath your bed. For decades, children have whispered about the monster that claws at the floorboards, the thing that drags you under if you dare to look. Parents dismiss it as superstition, a nightmare born of imagination. But what if those whispers weren't just stories? What if they were warnings? There's a house where no family stays for long. Each child who's lived there swears the same thing: after 3 a.m., if you look under the bed, you don't see dust or toys, you see eyes staring back. And once you notice them, they never stop watching. Some families moved away. Others vanished completely. And when authorities checked the house, they found something far worse than blood or bones. They found records. Names of people who disappeared, tied to a history no one wanted to acknowledge. Because sometimes, the monster under the bed isn't just a story. Sometimes, it's a reflection of everything society hides in the dark. The Johnson family thought they had finally caught a break. After years of scraping by, moving from one cramped apartment to the next, they signed the lease to a modest 2-story house on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs, or at least it felt like it. A lawn for the kids to play on, a quiet neighborhood where the nights weren't pierced by sirens, and rooms big enough for everyone to have space. It was Naomi, their youngest, who noticed it first. She pressed her cheek to the cool wooden floor of her new bedroom, peering into the shadows beneath the bed. "It's dark down there," she murmured, though her parents brushed it off. Moving day was exhausting, and no one wanted to entertain ghost stories from a 7-year-old. The neighborhood seemed polite on the surface. Smiling faces, curt nods from neighbors, but a distance lingered. No one welcomed them with cookies or invitations. Instead, there were stares through half-closed blinds. The kind that said you don't belong here. As boxes were unpacked, the parents found paperwork the landlord had left behind: leases, contracts, old tenant lists. Strangely, most of the names were black families. Almost all of them had stayed less than 2 years before moving out. A few files ended abruptly, without forwarding addresses, as though the families had simply disappeared. At night, the house carried a stillness that felt unnatural. The kind of silence that hummed beneath the floorboards. Each creak of wood echoed too loudly. Each shadow stretched a little too long. Naomi began waking at night, insisting she heard whispering from under her bed. Her older brother scoffed, telling her it was just pipes or dreams. But their mother remembered hearing similar things as a child, soft murmurs in the dark that grown-ups dismissed. The father, proud and tired, told himself the house was just old. But when he tried to speak to neighbors, they avoided the topic entirely. Some crossed the street to avoid him. Others changed the subject quickly, as if even mentioning the house invited something unwelcome. By the end of their first week, the Johnsons had begun to feel the strange weight of their new home. Not just in the uneasy glances from their neighbors, but in the way the air seemed thicker after midnight. The way Naomi refused to sleep unless her closet light was left on. And always, the way the silence shifted at exactly 3 a.m. The second week passed, and the house no longer felt like a home. Naomi's quiet fear spread like a stain, seeping into every corner. She no longer slept in her room, curling up on the couch instead, clutching her teddy bear tight. Her eyes, wide and hollow, darted toward the stairs whenever the hour grew late, as though something upstairs was waiting. The parents argued softly at night, whispering about her nightmares, about how children sometimes invent monsters to explain fears. But deep down, they both sensed something different. This wasn't just a phase. Naomi wasn't simply afraid of the dark, she was afraid of what the dark contained. One night, when the clock struck 3 a.m., her brother awoke to scratching sounds. They were faint at first, like nails brushing across the floorboards, but soon grew louder, angrier. He tiptoed toward Naomi's door, half expecting to catch her dragging furniture or playing tricks. But when he pressed his ear to the wood, he heard it, whispering. Not her voice. Not anyone's voice he recognized. A chorus of hushed murmurs, layered atop one another, as though dozens of people were speaking at once, trapped just beneath the floor. He froze. His breath turned shallow. The sound grew clearer, and among the whispers, he thought he heard names. Names that didn't belong to his family. Names like the ones in the old tenant records. The next morning, he told his parents. His father dismissed it, though his hands trembled as he gripped his coffee mug. His mother stayed silent, eyes dark, lips pressed thin. She remembered her grandmother once telling her about the hour when the walls speak. A superstition, she thought. Or maybe not. That day, she returned to the landlord's files, poring over the incomplete records. A pattern began to emerge. Every missing tenant family was black. Every disappearance was quietly buried. No investigations, no follow-ups, just a new lease signed with another desperate family looking for a chance. By the third week, the house had become unbearable at night. Lights flickered. Floorboards groaned under invisible weight. Sometimes the air itself seemed to throb, like a heartbeat pulsing through the walls. Naomi refused to go upstairs entirely. And then came the night the father finally looked. It was 3:04 a.m. when he awoke, sweat clinging to his skin. Something compelled him, an unshakable instinct, or maybe a challenge to his own disbelief. He went to Naomi's room, the floor icy beneath his bare feet. The shadows seemed thicker there, pooling in the corners. He crouched down slowly, pressing his face to the wooden floor, lifting the edge of the bed skirt. At first, only darkness. But then, two eyes blinked back at him. Not glowing, not monstrous, just human. Human, and impossibly close. A face pressed against the underside of the bed, as though another world existed there, filled with those who had come before. He stumbled back, heart racing, knocking into the dresser. The whispers swelled, louder now, crawling through the walls and into his ears. He couldn't make out all the words, but one phrase rose above the rest: "You don't belong here." Shaken, he tried to rationalize it. A hallucination. A trick of exhaustion. But the next day, Naomi refused to even enter the house. She sat on the curb, clutching her teddy bear, tears streaking her face. "They want us too," she whispered, almost too softly to hear. That evening, the mother confronted the landlord. She demanded answers. But the man's smile was thin, his voice steady. "Families come and go," he said flatly. "Some houses are just harder to keep." His eyes flicked toward the house, almost knowingly, before he closed the door in her face. The realization settled in heavy. This wasn't just about ghosts. This house wasn't haunted by chance, it was built on something. A cycle. A system that swallowed families whole, over and over, with neighbors, landlords, and authorities all complicit in their silence. And now, it had its sights set on them. By the end of that night, the family knew they had only two choices: leave immediately or risk becoming part of the whispers that rattled through the walls forever. But leaving wouldn't be so simple. Because as the clock ticked closer to 3 a.m. once more, the house seemed to tighten around them, every door heavier, every shadow deeper, every whisper louder. And beneath Naomi's bed, the eyes were waiting. The clock struck 3 a.m., and the house came alive. It began with the sound of breathing. Not theirs, but heavy, suffocating, as if dozens of lungs were inhaling in unison. The air thickened, pressing down on their chests. The father tried to move toward Naomi, but the hallway stretched unnaturally long, each step dragging like quicksand. The walls seemed to pulse, bending inward, trapping them inside. Naomi clutched her teddy bear tighter, her voice barely audible. "They're here." The whispers surged from every corner, under the floorboards, behind the wallpaper, inside the vents. But now they weren't whispers. They were screams, anguished cries layered with words that carried centuries of pain. We were taken. We were buried. We were erased. The family covered their ears, but the voices were inside them, rattling their bones, searing into their minds. The father grabbed Naomi's hand and pulled, racing down the stairs. The front door loomed just ahead, their only escape. But when he yanked it open, the world outside wasn't there. Instead, beyond the threshold was another hallway, identical to the one behind them, stretching endlessly, lined with doors that led nowhere. The house had folded in on itself, a trap with no way out. The mother screamed for them to run, but the floor cracked open beneath their feet, revealing the impossible, faces pressed against the underside of the floorboards, staring up through the splintered wood. Dozens, maybe hundreds, eyes wide, mouths moving silently, begging for release. They were families like theirs, swallowed by the house, hidden from history. Naomi stumbled, her teddy bear slipping from her hands and tumbling into the darkness below. She lunged after it, but the father caught her, dragging her back just as skeletal hands reached up, clawing for her ankles. The cries grew louder, their voices overlapping into a single demand: stay. Stay with us. Desperate, the mother shouted above the chaos, her voice hoarse. We are not yours. You will not take us. But the house disagreed. The staircase twisted, walls bending unnaturally, forcing them upward toward Naomi's room, the very place where it had all begun. The bed sat waiting, its shadow stretching unnaturally long across the floor. The father realized the truth then. The house didn't just haunt, it consumed. Every family who lived here was devoured, body and soul, until nothing remained but their whispers beneath the bed. It wasn't random, it was selective. Families like theirs, forgotten by society, easy to erase. The bed creaked as if inviting Naomi closer. She screamed, clinging to her mother, but the shadows slithered out from beneath it, curling like black smoke around her ankles, tugging her toward the dark. The father lunged, pulling with all his strength, but the shadows tightened, dragging harder. Naomi's feet slid across the floor as she wailed, her teddy bear's absence leaving her exposed. For a moment, it seemed inevitable, that she, too, would be pulled beneath, swallowed like the others. And then the mother acted. She grabbed the family Bible her grandmother had given her, one of the only heirlooms passed down, and slammed it against the floor. The sound cracked through the room, louder than the screams. She shouted, not a prayer, not words of faith, but a declaration of survival. She called out every name she had found in the records, every missing tenant the landlord had buried, speaking them into existence again. The walls shook violently, plaster raining down like dust. The whispers faltered, shifting into wails of rage. The shadows recoiled, snapping back beneath the bed as though burned by light. The floorboards groaned, the house trembling as if resisting her defiance. Naomi broke free, collapsing into her mother's arms. The father shielded them both, holding on as the house screamed, an inhuman roar that echoed from every corner. The sound swelled until it felt like it would shatter them. And then, suddenly, silence. The bed lay still. The whispers ceased. The shadows retreated. For the first time since moving in, the house was quiet. But the family knew this wasn't over. The silence wasn't peace. It was only waiting. The silence in the house was crushing. The family huddled together in Naomi's room, their bodies trembling, their minds still echoing with the screams that had filled the walls only moments before. The shadows had retreated, but the air carried a weight, as though the house had not given up, only paused. The father rose slowly, guiding his wife and daughter out of the room. Their footsteps creaked across the floor, but the sound was different now. Each groan of the wood felt like a reminder, like the house wanted them to remember that it was still there. Watching. Waiting. When they reached the front door, this time it opened. Beyond the threshold was the cool night air, the sound of distant traffic, the faint glow of streetlights. For a moment, they hesitated. Could they really step out? Was it real, or another trap? The mother tightened her grip on Naomi's hand and led the way, stepping into the night with cautious determination. The house did not stop them. They walked down the cracked sidewalk, never once looking back. Naomi clung to her mother, her bare feet scuffed and bruised, but she didn't cry. Her eyes remained fixed ahead, unblinking, as though she knew that looking back might give the house permission to follow. By dawn, they had made it to a neighbor's porch and collapsed there, exhausted and broken. The police arrived hours later, but their words were predictable. "Old houses creak," one officer said dismissively. "Stress can make people imagine things." The report was filed with minimal detail, their terror reduced to paperwork. The landlord arrived, irritation written across his face. He barely listened, shaking his head as if they were overreacting. "Another one leaving so soon," he muttered under his breath, as though they were the inconvenience, not the house. No one asked why tenants always left so quickly. No one asked why every family before them was gone. Days later, the family stayed with relatives across town. They should have felt safe, but sleep brought no peace. Naomi still woke at 3 a.m. every night, clutching at her mother, whispering that she could hear them, the voices, faint and distant, still calling from under the bed they had escaped. The father tried to find records of the house, digging deeper into archives and city registries. He discovered pages missing, families unlisted, rental records tampered with. It was deliberate, erasures written into the city's history, making sure those who vanished would never be remembered. The house was a symptom of something larger, a society that let entire generations disappear without acknowledgement. The mother sat Naomi down one evening, pressing the worn Bible into her daughter's hands. "Every name we remember," she told her gently, "is one they can't take away. That's how we fight back." Naomi nodded solemnly, tracing the names her mother had written inside the cover: tenants, families, children long forgotten. Each name became a thread tying them back to the living world, a small act of defiance against the darkness. But the family knew the truth. The house still stood. And it would keep standing. The landlord would paint over the cracks, patch up the broken windows, and lease it again. Another family would move in, drawn by the low rent, unaware of what lurked inside. The cycle would continue, because society allowed it. Because no one wanted to believe the whispers. The father considered going public, warning others, but deep down he knew how people would respond. They would laugh, dismiss it as superstition. Worse, they would twist the story, making it about his family's supposed paranoia or overreaction. The house would consume again, because erasure was what it thrived on. And yet, something had changed. By speaking the names aloud, by refusing to be silenced, they had fought back in a way no one else had. The house had recoiled. For now, it had let them go. The story ends not with victory, but with a warning. The family may have escaped, but the house remains, patient and hungry, waiting for the next occupants to lie down in that bed after 3 a.m. And the question lingers, chilling and unshakable. If a house can erase lives so easily, how many others, beyond these walls, have already been swallowed by silence? And if we don't remember them, who will?